Another year is upon us, and 2024 will feature an alliance continued between Esportsbet and Last Free Nation, and that means that me and Thorin are back with competitive edge for this year for both League of Legends and Counter-Strike. As usual, remember to subscribe to the Esportsbet YouTube for this content. If you want to continue watching it, good idea. And there's lots of other content that should be coming out this year as well, courtesy of
And flame us in the comments. If we're wrong, tell us in the comments.
Yeah, flame us. And we'll flame each other. That's part of the fun of doing this. I think we should just kick it off real quick, Thorin. We're taking a look at a bunch of LCS, one LCK and one LPL match. On Summoning Insight, you and I had differing opinions about the upcoming BDS and Heretics match. BDS at 1.5, Heretics at 2.2 approximately while we did this. I took the favorite in BDS because of Perks' performance recently. You took Heretics because of their veterancy. Is that fair to say?
Because of all of the other Perks performances in history. Yeah, in part, I'm a stand, especially because here's my problem, right? I could individually be out on Perks. I could individually think sometimes Wonder has an odd gear. But together, those three names together, though, Yankos, I have to. Until this ship goes down, I'm not bailing, Monty. I'm not jumping ship. I'm keeping on this one.
I think Wonder and Yankos have been doing well, but I'm a little bit out on Perks' performance, especially this last week. So hard for me to believe in that when BDS has just been very consistent. But I could see it. I could see it happening. I could see the upset happening. As for the rest of them, G2 is obviously a massive favorite. And then we also have Fnatic 1.4 against Mad Lions 2.5, and SK a favorite against Vitality. But SK's at 1.5, Vitality's at 2.1. I think we agreed that this one just feels too volatile for us to touch. That seems like very difficult.
When you have a game where both teams can win, then I go by price. That's what I'm going to decide between. And the problem is, I think this is a rare example of where the price doesn't make sense on either side, in my opinion. Like, I want to say SK is clean, but they're not that much of a lock that I really know they'll win with those odds. And then similarly, Vitality as an underdog's a nice team to bet. But that's not really super high, though, is it? So for me, I think this is a bit of a trap game. I'm staying away from this one. I've made mistakes before, and I'm not making out this one.
All right, let's talk about some games where we do think that there is some upside to be found here. And I have picked a couple Shopify Rebellion matches because my new fetish, Thorin, is thinking that Shopify Rebellion is actually secretly much better than their record shows. We've only got the 4 games.
The thing. You have an obvious reason why, though, which is, it's funny, everyone thinks that we just irrationally hate TSM. Mate, obviously the Insanity guy was on TSM. Mate, he actually is just like a good player. And what's cool is he has such a unique style, especially in BO1s. You can win a lot of games with this guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they have very weird champion pools, which are hard to prepare for, especially when you're playing 2 different teams in the same week. They're also, because they're the on-paper weaker team that you play against, in most weeks. And I think also you have to think about Shopify Rebellion already had to play against arguably the 2 top teams in the league in FlyQuest and Cloud9, and they actually stole a win against Cloud9, and it was pretty convincing win. And I'm just going to point this out, guys. Their match against FlyQuest, they fucking bungled the game at like level 1 or like in the first few minutes of the game. And they almost came back and won that game. They almost came back and won that game despite being in a very horrible position. And so, sure, maybe they continue to bungle early games, but I actually think that their macro and shot calling is better than most people believe it is. And especially, Thorin, when I see odds like we're looking at right now,
it's bonkers, isn't it?
They're underdogs to Dignitas, nearly at 2.0 odds is the time we're looking at this. And they're 3.2 odds against NRG. Now, is NRG a better team? Yes, they are. Is it impossible that Shopify Rebellion wins this? I think that those odds should be a lot closer. I think those odds should be a lot
those odds should be like 2.5. You know what I mean? That would be more like within the realms of, I think this is it all. I think you have to take the Shopify on this one, at least with a little baby bet, maybe.
Yeah, I think you definitely take a flyer on this one. There are going to be, I think, guys, a little bit difficult to predict because they do have a sense of inconsistency to them so far. But I feel pretty confident that if we go like 200 here against Dignitas, that feels pretty good return on the almost 2.0 odds. And then I'm going to go with maybe 100. Is that too much? Maybe 50. 50 on the NRG match. So just trying to take a little bit of a flyer here with Shopify. I do think that this team's going to turn around, and their second half of this round robin is looking a lot easier. And we also have to consider that they didn't even have their starting roster when they came into this league. And Wild Turtle had some very, I think, respectable performances, but they were expecting to have Bvoy. And Bvoy actually turned in a really good performance versus Cloud9, so you can see why they wanted this guy as their starter.
I will say,
over time, I think they'll get better.
The Bvoy guy got memed on when he was on Misfits, if you remember, back in like LEC a few years back. But I can tell you, I know Featherven, and Featherven told me it wasn't a joke. That guy, he said, had really good mechanics. He said he was like, there's a reason he played in the LPL. So you can imagine if he can get grounded in the LCS, he could do work.
Yeah, his Varus actually looked very clean against Cloud9, and he didn't have the hardest job because he was never really under threat, but he did an excellent work at like maximizing his damage and making sure that Shopify walked away with a relatively convincing win versus the team that everybody thinks is the best. And sure, there was a janky draft, and sure, they did weird things, but that's just who Shopify Rebellion are, and we have to expect that to continue. So as far as underdog value right now, I think a lot of people are down on Shopify, but if you actually look at the circumstances of their games and that they have challenged some of the best teams in the league, this is a team that should very comfortably, in my mind, be in the playoffs.
So, I mean, I can't even believe Dignitas is a favorite over them. Like, I would have this team beating Dignitas. I like that one. Yeah. I think Dignitas are frauds, mate. They're going to be like the 7th or 8th team, in my opinion.
I am sad because, like, obviously it's best of ones. And I really feel like if you gave me a best of 3, that Shopify would definitely win this. So there's still, there's always risk in the best of ones.
Sure.
There's always risk in the best of ones.
Sure.
The other big match that's coming up this week is Cloud9 versus FlyQuest. Clearly, like, this is going to be very hype. Cloud9, FlyQuest, NRG kind of duking it out for the top of the table in the LCS. FlyQuest did lose to NRG this past week, but again, we have to look at the circumstances in which they lost, which is in that game, FlyQuest's rookie AD carry and still very new support player Busio decided to take a very bad level 1 fight, which then forced Inspired to kind of like sacrifice his jungle pathing to come bot and gank at level 2, which then just spiraled completely out of control to NRG, stomping them through having, a pretty substantial macro advantage. I mean, like, even after the game, Contract said in the interview that I listened to that Insanity lost the game by ganking at level 2 and decided to throw the game, which is true. Like, that's just true. Inspired.
Yes.
Sorry, lost the game by trying to gank at level 2. Now, you contrast that with games where we've seen Inspired just completely run the show and probably be the best jungler potentially in the LCS. Like, Blabber's very good as well, but Inspired's like early game pathing and like min-maxing is really
his control is incredible.
Yeah, his like counter jungling is super good.
Yep.
And so if you don't let Inspired do that and play the game his way, and you actually gimp him by forcing him into very bad situations, it takes away all of the strengths that we see from FlyQuest. So point is like, it also prevented them from playing like with this Darius pick that they selected in the top side to try and get Bwipo ahead because they were concerned about the bot lane. Anyway, it ruined their whole game plan is the point. Cloud9 also coming off a really like rather cocky draft when they lost against Shopify Rebellion. And I do think Cloud9 is going to win this game, but I do not think that FlyQuest is a 2.8 underdog here. That just seems crazy.
Oh, it's bonkers. I mean, like you're saying, there are ways both teams can win, but like, to me, this is almost like a coin flip game. Like, I actually think FlyQuest on their A game is as good as Cloud9. Maybe Cloud9 has better overall players. Like you're saying, there are some rookie players that have some problems on, but if you look at it, like, I think the odds price you in for the FlyQuest side here, of course.
I don't think there's any way you can't look at this and see like immense upside for FlyQuest. I would tip Cloud9 as a favorite in this matchup, but it would be more, FlyQuest should be maybe at like 1.9 something like that. 2, maybe.
I also think your angle's a good one too. If there's any player with the strengths and style, and also, by the way, the mechanics, never forget, Inspired has really good mechanics. This guy's style is almost purpose-built to be the one that can actually neutralize Blabber. We know Blabber can just go like crazy on anyone, but like this guy has the style to actually track him, to mind game him, to fucking actually even outplay him potentially. I think, yeah, this is a good matchup.
Also, are we going to pretend there's not a world where Blippo just completely bodies Fudge in the top side?
Of course.
Especially with some of his weirder picks, like especially with some of his weirder
I could see that being a bloodbath, that top lane, mate. Yeah. Someone's going to die within the first 10 minutes. But now we're down. Come on. Someone's dying.
So I think right here with FlyQuest, I was going to put 100 USDT onto this game at 2.8. Again, not taking a little bit more of a risk than we did in the Shopify game versus NRG, but still being a little bit conservative, especially since the return is going to be quite good on that front. Let's move over to some of the Asian leagues. Hanwha Life up against D+. Hanwha is now coming off of an extremely embarrassing loss where Zeka got completely destroyed by Faker in the mid lane and had some appalling quirky games. And clearly that's not going to happen every time. But I counter that to you, Thorin, with the fact that D+, Showmaker had a pop-off week, had a pentakill on Caston, had a great game on Silas. Lucid is looking like, a really strong prospect, has had some excellent play for a rookie player so far. And is Hanwha Life going to be the team that ultimately takes D+ down a notch here? D+ also played Gen G in a very close best of 3, won the first game, almost won the second game, and won the series 2-0 before finally, a little bit more one-sided Gen G's favor in the third game. But they've proven that they can hang with the best. Meanwhile, Hanwha's record has been inflated by playing against bottom 5 teams in the league. First time they come up against a top 5 team, instantly destroyed. So I'm not buying this that D+ is a 2.3 underdog here.
The problem you have is this is an example of what happens when you look at the two rosters on paper, Monty. Because the problem is Hanwha Life's on paper looks spicy. Hey, this could be really good. Look at, oh my God. Imagine all these players at their peak if they all at the same time pop up. Meanwhile, you go over to the D+ one and their names don't have sexy value right now. Like obviously Kingan's a meme and even though, as you say, he was the MVP of Worlds, he doesn't get the shine that people give to Zeka. They forget he even exists. Lucid, people just didn't know him because they don't watch Challenge. I don't blame him on that one. Showmaker comes off the worst years of his career where he looked actually like people said maybe he should retire. And then aiming's really good, but the joke is everyone never fucking paid attention when he was in KT anyway and used to talk about every bloody other ADC in the league. Like they used to brag about Gumayushi when I was watching these games when like aiming was just carrying the whole match for KT, and then Kellen was obviously a mega meme and every Deft fan hates him to the ends of the earth. I do sort of low-key as well, but the difference is even though theirs isn't
good
sexy at all. Yeah, this is the point. In the server, they're actually better than their names, though. They're actually playing pretty well. Like, some of these pieces are standing up. Like you say, Showmaker and the top players at the moment in the LCK. Lucid actually is going to be, like, probably rookie of the split. Kingan, like, if Kingan and Kellen are your worst players, you're not a bad team, actually. Suddenly you've got a half-decent team, whereas I agree. The Hanwha Life one, like, my Copium says they could be really good. They just haven't been so far. That's the problem. They haven't. So I agree with you. If you look at it, to be all 3, but, like, look at those odds, 2.3. Like, I think there's an enormously high chance this is like a 3-game series with one really close game. So I love this. I think we take D+, yeah. Take D+.
I think that just the value here for D+ feels very strong. And I think at best, this is a coin flip, just given the recent performances. Yes. And people are just overrating Hanwha Life because of their spot in the rankings, not looking at the actual opponents that they've faced, which have been some of the worst teams in the LCK. And there's a very clear divide between top 5 and bottom 5 in the LCK right now, like extremely clear.
Oh, and by the way, shared this in as well. There's absolutely potentially a game in this best of 3 where, like we said on some of the insight, Zeka could take like an Akali and he will opt into a fucking Azir and then Showmaker will just win. Like they might even just give you a free mid lane. It's ridiculous. Yeah. That's possible.
Yeah, because for whatever reason, we haven't seen Zeka actually playing Akali in this meta. And Showmaker's willing to play Silas. Like, I'm very curious if there's going to be big changes for Hanwha Life next week when it comes to their draft priority. But until we see something like that, I'm a lot higher on D+ because they simply played better against top 5 teams. Like, they simply did better.
His most played champion, he's played 3 games of Azir and 3 games of Corki. Like, brother, those aren't your champions. You are not fucking humanoid from season 9 or whatever. That ain't your shit, mate. Stay away from those. That ain't for you. That's not for you.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and put 100 USDT onto this one as well.
And just as a personal, predilection, Monty, I just like to bet against Zeka if I can, whenever possible. I like to bet against him.
That's an excellent segue into our next match, which also features a Zeka. This one on LNG. Do you also like to bet against this Zeka? Because this is another one where I think like name value is massively skewing the odds in this early season. Because otherwise, how do you justify what we're seeing right here?
As far as I can tell, this is just that LNG looked dodgy in the Thunder Talk game.
Yes,
where they were supposed to win and they didn't. And so it's making people question the roster. Meanwhile, first of all, people still see the name JDG. They're like, oh my God. They don't have Night, remember. And also, they are one of the better teams. But the difference is, I actually think JDG is going to be way less of a powerful team this season. Whereas actually, I expect, the thing with the LNG one is this. I'm not panic stations, mate. Give them time. There's a million matches. This lineup on paper just looks like it will. By the end of the season, it will almost inevitably be an elite team, like the LNG squad. It almost can't be bad, surely. Surely it can't be bad.
So I think people are a little bit out on LNG because they did look ropey and they did lose to Thunder Talk, and that is embarrassing. But also, so I'm gonna provide some color to that loss for you guys. First off, they have Mark now on this roster. Mark has not looked very good. So the question is, do they actually put Hung in for this match or not? Hung was probably the worst part of LNG last year.
He had a lot of ints, sure.
He was still better than this iteration of Mark that we're seeing right now. So I would say, like, we'll see what the roster changes actually are. JDG has been arguably, I don't know if I would say downgraded, but changed pretty significantly at mid lane. They have Flandre, who is admittedly an LPL legend, but they also have Sheer, this rookie player who I've heard is not playing for reasons. I'm not sure about this. I've heard is not playing for reasons like not related to the game. Like he might be too young or something like that. So they have been rolling with Flandre, who is not the player that he was legendarily on when he was on like Snake and stuff like that, when he was kind of at the peak of his powers a number of years ago. So JDG has been kind of categorically downgraded. And on top of that, Zeka had a really good glow up year last year, especially as we got into summer playoffs and worlds. And so when I think about the top lane matchup, I actually kind of give that advantage over to LNG. And we saw the jungle change, Tarzan Scout synergy kind of out the window, but Scout is reigning LPL MVP, has had outstanding performances, is incredibly consistent. Gala is still on this roster, guys. And Gala, again, was not good at the start of this split, but let's not read too much into it.
He'll get there.
Yeah, he's consistently been like a top 5 80 carry within this league. So is Ruler going to have that much of an advantage? I think it depends on the support situation. But my point is like you can see angles where through top lane, especially with top lane carries being powerful right now, that LNG would be able to win. And I don't care what you think. There is no universe where this is a 1.2 to 3.6 game for LNG. 3.6 are the odds. They are saying that it is more likely that Shopify Rebellion beats NRG than LNG beats JDG. And that Thorin, I promise you, this all has to do with name value of JDG from last year. And the fact that JDG beat LNG twice in best of fives last LPL playoffs. Like, that's what this is from. It's not based in any kind of reality.
I actually think this is an amazing value bet on the LNG side because you will. I'm telling you right now, once LNG gets really good, and mark my words, there will be a top team by the end of the split.
There'll be at least top 8.
You will look back on these odds and they will seem impossible. You'll think there's no way it could be like that, because like to get a team with players as good and a bunch of them are playing together, like it just feels so likely that they just bounce back immediately. This is actually like potentially they might even be like the dominant team in this matchup. So I don't even know if I truly would count it as an upset if they win. Like we haven't played that many games, guys. It's just the beginning of the year. As I said on some of the insight, they go lighter at the beginning of the season in the LPL. They don't go 100% from right out the gate. So yeah, I think this is a great. I think the value on LNG is bonkers, mate. You got to take it.
Yeah, and this is a diminished JDG too, right? Like this isn't the 369 version with and like the Knight version, right? This is it's a more supportive like play through bot lane, have fewer win conditions. JDG, like just straight up, like I think this team has fewer win conditions than the one last year. This isn't the super team. They don't have the variety of weapons. They opted into more supportive players at this point in time. And while LNG lost the Tarzan Scout synergy that was so legendary, you know, they still have a lot of good fundamental pieces and shouldn't be underestimated. So at 3.6, it feels almost criminal not to just like take 100 USDT. You know, I'm not even going to use the word flyer because like this should be a very close matchup. This should be a very close matchup. All right, guys, that'll do it for this week for Competitive Edge. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Remember to go ahead, leave some comments below with your predictions. If you've got good ones, we might feature them on the show in the future. Till then, we will see you next week, and look out for CS Competitive Edge as well as we get into IEM Katowice if you follow both games. See you then.